There is a truth about female nature that almost no man is willing to say out loud, not because it's complicated, but because it's too honest, too uncomfortable, and too disruptive to every romantic illusion men are taught to believe. A truth that explains why her loyalty changed, why her affection shifted, why her behavior made no sense, until you finally see the hidden psychology underneath it. Most men think heartbreak comes from betrayal. It doesn't. It comes from misunderstanding human nature, from expecting purity where self-interest quietly rules, from believing emotion where instinct is actually calling the shots. Today, we're going to expose that truth. Not to attack women, not to become cynical, but to finally help you see reality clearly so you stop being blindsided, stop being used, and stop giving your loyalty to people who were only loyal to the benefits you provided. Once you understand these principles, you will never look at relationships the same way again, and you will never lose power in them again. Welcome to the brutal truth about female nature that no one dares to say. Most people cling to a comforting fantasy about relationships, especially relationships with women. They want to believe connection is built on emotion, affection, or some invisible spiritual bond. But the truth is far simpler, far colder, and far more liberating. Once you finally accept it, no attachment between humans is ever pure. Every connection you've ever had, every relationship you've ever invested in, and every bond you believed was special, has always rested on one thing: exchange. Not love, not destiny, not unconditional devotion. Exchange. This isn't cynicism. It's clarity. It's the Stoic awakening that every man eventually faces when life forces him to examine what people really value, not what they say they value. When you strip away the poetry and illusions, human attachment is revealed as a system of mutual benefit. What do you give? What do they receive? What happens when that balance shifts? A woman stays, invests, and attaches herself to you for the same reason anyone attaches themselves to anything, because they're receiving something they perceive as valuable. That value might be emotional stability, attention, financial security, intimacy, status, protection, or even the way you make them feel about themselves. But it is always value, always exchange, always conditional. This is what most men refuse to see. They want to believe loyalty is a default, that love is a lifelong promise, and that being a good man guarantees devotion. They want to imagine that if they give enough, try hard enough, and love deeply enough, a woman will stay forever. But this belief collapses the moment you remove the benefit you once provided. Lose the job, lose the confidence, lose the emotional availability, lose the strength she admired, lose the self-respect that once defined you, and watch how quickly her attachment changes. Harsh, maybe, uncomfortable, always, but false, never. This is the part that hurts men the most. She didn't stay because of who you are. She stayed because of the value she received from who you are. And when that value disappeared, her attachment wasn't broken. It simply recalculated. Women don't leave because they're cruel. They leave because the exchange no longer benefits them. And you do the same thing. Think back through your life. The friends who drifted, the hobbies you abandoned, the jobs you outgrew, the relationships you let fade. Why did you stop? Why did you pull away? Why did you detach? Because the benefit changed. Because the cost became too high. Because the exchange no longer made sense. You weren't evil. You were human. And she is too. The real tragedy is that men build their entire emotional identity on illusions of unconditional connection. They expect permanence in a world built on impermanence. They expect loyalty in a system built on self-interest. They expect emotional purity in relationships that have always been transactional. When a woman pulls away, men feel betrayed. When she loses interest, they feel abandoned. When she no longer fights for the relationship, they feel unloved. But if you remove the illusion, it becomes clear. She didn't betray you. She simply followed the laws of human attachment. People stay for value. People leave when the value shifts. And attachment is always the child of exchange, not emotion. This doesn't mean love isn't real. It means love is never the whole picture. Beneath the love, beneath the connection, beneath the warmth and affection, there is always an invisible negotiation. What do you bring to her life? What does she bring to yours? Is the exchange balanced? And here's the true Stoic truth. Most men never accept. Even the most devoted woman is attached to the version of you that benefits her. The strong you, the centered you, the confident you, the purposeful you, the man with direction, ambition, self-respect. If you lose that version, she loses her reason to stay. This is why attachment is never pure. This is why loyalty always has conditions. This is why connection lives and dies on value, not sentiment. And this is why the Stoic man must understand the nature of exchange. You are not entitled to loyalty. You are not entitled to devotion. You are not entitled to unconditional presence. What you are entitled to is the truth. And the truth is this: people remain attached when your presence enriches their life. They detach when it doesn't. The moment you accept this, everything changes. You stop clinging. You stop chasing. You stop begging for emotional guarantees that don't exist. You stop expecting permanence from people who are always evolving. And you finally begin to live like a man who understands reality. Because once you see that attachment is never pure, you also see the power that gives you. You can build yourself into a man whose presence naturally creates value. You can stop giving to people who only take. You can walk away when an exchange becomes unbalanced. You can protect your peace without guilt. You can choose relationships consciously rather than blindly. And most importantly, you stop being surprised when human nature reveals itself. This is the Stoic awakening. Painful at first, liberating forever. Women rarely say it out loud. But every connection they form operates on a private list of conditions, rules that run quietly beneath the surface of their affection. These conditions aren't written, spoken, or negotiated. They simply exist, shaping attraction, loyalty, and the longevity of every bond they create. And a man who doesn't understand them finds himself confused, blindsided, or abandoned without an explanation. But once you see the pattern clearly, everything begins to make sense. At the core of female psychology is a deep need for emotional security, something far more complicated than simple safety. It is a blend of stability, leadership, consistency, and masculine presence. Women are biologically wired to assess whether a man can provide emotional steadiness in a chaotic world. They do not say this directly, because saying it would expose vulnerability, but everything they do, everything they tolerate, and everything they walk away from comes down to this invisible calculation. Does being close to him make my life easier or harder? This is why women pull back the moment a man loses his stability, his purpose, or his direction. Not because they're cruel, but because the foundation holding their attraction together begins to crack. They don't leave because they stop caring. They leave because conditions they never voiced are suddenly no longer met. And in that moment, they retreat to self-protection quietly, instinctively, without explanation. What men often misinterpret as she changed is actually the moment her internal ledger updates. When you lose your value in her system, value defined by strength, clarity, purpose, and emotional composure, she withdraws. Sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once. The truth is, uncomfortable women do not stay for history, promises, or potential. They stay for how it feels right now. They stay when the conditions are met, and they leave when they're not. This is why love can evaporate with shocking speed. You lose your job, your ambition, your confidence, or your center, and suddenly the warmth you relied on begins to fade, not because she never cared, but because her emotional survival instinct overrides her sentimental attachment. Women attach deeply, but only when attachment aligns with benefit, emotional, psychological, or practical. When you stop providing the experience she needs to feel anchored, she stops offering the emotional investment you once took for granted. Vulnerability terrifies women when it's given to the wrong man. So instead of saying, "I'm losing trust in you," she simply becomes distant. Instead of admitting, "I don't feel safe in this connection," she creates space. Instead of stating, "I'm no longer inspired by you," she lets the relationship dissolve. Silence becomes her shield, indifference becomes her armor, and confusion becomes your punishment for ignoring the quiet shifts that were visible all along. Men who take this personally never escape the cycle. They try harder. They beg. They negotiate. They bargain. They cling to words she said months or years ago, not realizing those words were tied to conditions that no longer exist. But men who understand female nature through a Stoic lens recognize a universal truth. Women respond to reality, not promises. They respond to strength, not sentiment. They respond to the man you are now, not the man you used to be. There's a reason women rarely admit these conditions. Confessing them out loud sounds transactional, unromantic, and self-interested. But that's exactly what human relationships are, exchanges of value. A woman's value to a man is different than a man's value to a woman. But the dynamic is the same. We stay where our needs are met. We leave where they aren't. A woman will stay with a man she loves deeply until she realizes she's carrying the emotional weight alone. She will stay with a man she respects until his behavior contradicts the image she admired. She will stay with a man who gives her peace until his chaos becomes louder than his leadership. When these conditions shift, her attachment dissolves in silence. But when they are met, she becomes loyal in ways few men truly understand. This is not about playing a role. It's about embodying a way of being. You don't hold on to a woman by convincing her with words. You hold on to her by living in a state that keeps her feminine instincts anchored. Presence, purpose, unshakable calm, direction, boundaries, the internal qualities that make her feel she can exhale in your presence. And here is the Stoic awakening. When you meet these conditions from a place of strength, not fear, you stop trying to keep her, and she starts choosing you effortlessly. Because for a woman, safety isn't something you talk about. It's something she feels, and she feels it only in the presence of a man who stands firmly in himself, regardless of her mood, her approval, or her temporary doubts. The conditions were never meant to cage you. They were meant to shape you into the kind of man who doesn't need to chase, because the right woman naturally gravitates toward the gravity of who you are. Most men think they discover a woman's true nature through her words, her affection, or her promises. But the Stoic truth is harsher and far more reliable. You learn who someone is the moment they meet a boundary they don't like. Words can be sweet. Emotions can be misleading. Intentions can be misunderstood. But how a person responds to limits that never lies. A boundary is not a rule. It is not a demand. It is not a threat. A boundary is simply a line that says, "This is who I am, and this is how I allow myself to be treated." And nothing exposes authenticity faster than the moment that line is tested. Women test boundaries instinctively, not out of malice, but out of psychology honed over thousands of years. Every test is a question unspoken, subtle, but extremely revealing. Are you the man you claim to be? Do you stand where you say you stand, or do you fold the moment you fear losing me when she pushes? Even gently. She's not trying to destroy you. She's trying to see what's real. Most men fail, not because they are weak, but because they think love means collapsing themselves to keep the peace. They believe compromise equals connection. They think sacrificing themselves proves they are good men. But all it proves to her is that your value is negotiable, and a negotiable man cannot be respected. This is why boundaries reveal truth faster than any declaration of love. Let me show you how this unfolds. When you establish a boundary, something as simple as "I don't tolerate disrespect," or if you cancel last minute twice, "I stop making plans," you're not trying to control her. You're defining your standards. But she will test them, consciously or unconsciously, because every woman wants to know what kind of man she's dealing with, not the man you pretend to be when things are easy, but the man you actually are when something challenges you. And here is the brutal truth. If a boundary exists only when it's convenient, it is not a boundary. It is a wish. And women do not respect wishes. They respect consequences. The moment you fold because you're afraid of upsetting her, afraid of losing her, afraid of creating distance, she learns something you didn't want to reveal. His fear of losing me is stronger than his integrity. And from that moment on, The dynamic changes, not because she's cruel, but because she now knows she can push and you will bend. Boundaries, then, are not about strictness or control. They are about self-respect made visible, and when a woman encounters a man whose boundaries are real, unwavering, and calmly enforced, something deep in her psychology shifts. Her ego can no longer play. Her tests no longer work. Her assumptions no longer hold. She sees a man who cannot be swayed by emotion, pressure, charm, or cows. A man like that is rare. A man like that is magnetic. A man like that commands respect. Think back on every relationship where you were mistreated or taken for granted. The real issue wasn't that she didn't care, at least not at the beginning. The issue was that you allowed her to behave in ways that chipped away at your dignity, and you did nothing. You taught her that your emotional world had no guardrails, and people, men and women, will always expand into whatever space they're allowed to occupy. This is why boundaries reveal truth. They expose who genuinely values you, and who only values the comfort you provide. A woman who truly respects you responds to a boundary with adjustment. She might be surprised. She might push back lightly, but she will self-correct because she recognizes your standard and she values the connection enough to rise to meet it. A woman who is only there for convenience, entertainment, validation, or advantage will react differently. She'll resist, argue, belittle, threaten distance, or emotionally weaponize withdrawal. Her reaction is not rejection, it is revelation. You didn't lose her. You discovered her. This is what Machiavelli observed and what Stoicism teaches in a more grounded way. Human nature reveals itself under pressure, not comfort. And boundaries apply pressure, not harsh pressure, not manipulative pressure, but the pressure of clarity. When you say, "This is my line," you're not cutting her out. You're giving her the chance to show her character. You're offering the relationship a moment of truth, something most people avoid their entire lives, because the truth can be uncomfortable. But the truth is always better than illusion. A man without boundaries lives in illusion, hoping, guessing, assuming. A man with boundaries lives in reality clear, stable, unshakable. Your boundaries are not for her. They are for you. And the woman who is meant for your life will not fear them. She will recognize them as the mark of a man who knows himself. People grow up believing a dangerous myth that if you love someone enough, if you give enough, if you are loyal enough, they will love you back the same way. But human behavior does not work through affection. It works through incentives. People respond to consequences, not intentions. Respect is shaped by boundaries, not emotions. And no matter how beautiful the love feels, it collapses the moment consequences disappear. This is the part no one wants to admit, especially in relationships with women. A woman doesn't respect a man because he loves her deeply. She respects him because he loves himself enough to enforce what he will and will not tolerate. Most men fail here. They confuse being good with being respected. They confuse being soft with being loving. They confuse accommodating behavior with emotional safety. But in reality, the more a man erases his own standards, in the name of love. The faster a woman loses the very thing she once admired in him, the Stoic shift: you are not respected for what you give, but for what you refuse to lose. Stoic philosophy teaches that a man's dignity comes from what he protects within himself, not what he pours endlessly into others. When a woman tests your boundaries, and she will, she isn't trying to hurt you. She's trying to understand you. What kind of man are you? Where is your line? Do you fold under pressure? Can you be swayed? Is your peace negotiable? Is your dignity for sale? These tests aren't verbal. They are subtle. A sarcastic comment, a small disrespect, a shift in tone, a cancelled plan, a moment of coldness. She is measuring your internal structure, not because she wants dominance, but because she needs to know if you are emotionally stable enough to be trusted. This is where most men fail. They react with emotion instead of principle. They explain instead of enforce. They try to win back approval instead of preserving their worth. The moment you abandon your standards for her comfort, something shifts inside her. Respect dies a little. Why being loved is not enough. Love is emotional. Respect is behavioral. And the two are not the same. A woman may love you and still raise her voice at you, disregard your boundaries, manipulate with emotion, take more than she gives, not because she is cruel, but because you allowed a dynamic where consequences disappeared. Humans operate naturally on reinforcement. If she can disrespect you with no repercussion, she will repeat it. If she breaks agreements and nothing changes, she learns. Agreements don't matter. If she pushes and you fold, she learns. You're bendable. Respect comes from friction, from knowing that violating your boundaries has a cost. Love comes from comfort. Respect comes from structure. Attraction needs both. A man who is loved but not respected becomes cute. A man who is respected but not loved becomes distant. A man who embodies both becomes magnetic. The rule: she will never tell you. If your boundaries don't mean anything to you, then you don't mean anything to me. A woman will never say this out loud. Most don't even consciously realize it, but their behavior reveals it every time. Respect is felt through consistency, enforcement, consequences, self-possession, emotional discipline. It is not felt through gifts, words, apologies, or declarations of love. A man who says, "Don't talk to me like that," but stays when she does, is teaching her that he is a liar to himself. A man who says, "I need honesty," but tolerates half-truths, is teaching her he doesn't need what he claims. A man who says, "I won't chase disrespect," but runs the moment she pulls away, is teaching her that her moods control him. She learns not from your words, but from the cost of crossing your invisible lines. Respect comes from the consequence she feels, not the speech she hears. Women don't trust speeches. They trust experiences. They trust the man who quietly withdraws from disrespect. They trust the man who keeps his routine, even when she's emotional. They trust the man who walks away when values are violated. They trust the man who doesn't negotiate his dignity. This isn't aggression. This is Stoic discipline. It's saying without saying, "My peace is sacred. My standards are real. My presence is earned." And the moment she feels that truth, everything changes. Her tone softens. Her femininity rises. Her behavior aligns. Her inconsistency fades. Her appreciation awakens. Her respect returns stronger than before. Because she now knows she is dealing with a man who is not held together by her approval, but by his own inner structure. And that kind of man, a woman does not play with. There is a brutal truth about human nature. No one dares to say out loud the more accessible you become, the less valuable you appear. Not because people are evil, not because they don't care, but because the human mind is wired to devalue what requires no effort to obtain. And nowhere is this more obvious than in female psychology. When a woman feels your presence constantly, your attention, your availability, your emotional openness, she doesn't consciously decide to respect you less. She simply adapts. Humans normalize whatever is always available. They stop noticing it. They stop appreciating it. They stop valuing it. This isn't cynicism. This is the predictable mechanism Machiavelli observed centuries ago. Scarcity creates value. Abondance destroys it. Distance, in contrast, awakens something ancient in the human mind: curiosity, longing, imagination. The space you create becomes a canvas onto which she projects meaning, desire, and intrigue. But when that space disappears, so does her perception of your worth. Women rarely admit this, but their attraction thrives on mystery, pacing, and selective access, not on constant closeness. This is why the early stage of a relationship always feels electric. Two independent worlds orbiting each other. Two separate lives with their own gravity fields. She doesn't fully have you. You don't fully have her. Every meeting requires effort. Every conversation feels earned. Every moment feels intentional. But the moment a man collapses the distance, when he fuses his life to hers, when he becomes an extension rather than an individual, something fundamental shifts. She stops chasing. She stops imagining. She stops feeling the quiet tension that attraction is built on. What once felt exciting becomes predictable. What once felt rare becomes routine. What once felt magnetic becomes mundane. People think that closeness creates love. In reality, unregulated closeness suffocates it. Stoic philosophy understood this long before modern psychology confirmed it. A man's power, his respect, his attraction, his emotional leverage does not come from how much he gives a woman. It comes from how disciplined he remains in preserving his own identity, his own rhythm, his own center. Distance is not the absence of love. It is the preservation of identity. Every woman desires a man who has a world she must earn her way into, not a man who hands over his entire world on day one. She wants to feel chosen, not engulfed. She wants access, not ownership. She wants to feel your presence, but she wants to miss it too. That missing, that emotional hunger, is what sustains desire. But most men, once they feel secure, abandon the very behaviors that created the connection in the first place. They stop pursuing their goals. They stop seeing their friends. They stop nurturing their mission. They collapse their independence into the relationship, hoping closeness will deepen love. Instead, they unknowingly kill the polarity that love breathes through. Distance solves this by restoring the natural tension that attraction requires, not artificial distance, not manipulative distance, not games or coldness or emotional unavailability, but strategic distance, the kind that comes from living a real life with real purpose, when she knows you have places to be, people to meet, responsibilities to fulfill, dreams to build, disciplines to maintain. She sees you as a man with weight, with gravity, with structure, a man who is not floating in her orbit, but who pulls her into his. Distance shows her that your time is valuable. Distance signals that your identity is intact. Distance makes your presence meaningful because your absence has weight. And here is the hidden layer. Distance is not about her at all. It's about you. The man who fears distance is the man who doubts his own value. He clings because he thinks she might leave. He fuses because he thinks closeness guarantees loyalty. He stays hyper-accessible because he is terrified of silence. But the man who embraces distance communicates something entirely different. I do not fear losing you. I remain myself, with or without you. That is the essence of masculine strength. Not dominance, not coldness, but self-possession, the ability to remain whole, centered, and sovereign. This kind of man does not chase approval. He does not flood the connection with constant availability. He does not abandon his world for hers. Instead, he lives in disciplined pacing, close enough to build connection, distant enough to preserve value. Women never say this directly, but they respond to it instinctively. When you are fully present, they soften. When you pull away to pursue your mission, they lean in. When you return, they engage with fresh energy. The rhythm matters more than the intensity. Too much presence breeds contempt. Too much distance breeds detachment. Healthy pacing breeds desire. A well-balanced man is not unpredictable. He is unreadable in the best way. Not mysterious because he hides, but mysterious because he lives. She cannot consume all of you. She cannot predict all of you. She cannot possess all of you. And that is precisely what keeps her drawn to you. The Stoic truth is this: you do not destroy attraction through distance. You destroy it through neediness disguised as closeness. A magnetic man lets a woman feel him but not hold him. He lets her access him but not drain him. He lets her come close but never close enough to collapse his identity. Because he knows that the moment he becomes fully absorbed, fully available, fully hers, he stops being the man she was drawn to and becomes the man she tolerates. Distance is not the enemy of closeness. Distance is the architect of value. There comes a moment in every man's life when the world stops being magical, romantic, or idealistic and becomes painfully clear. That moment is the beginning of Stoic awakening. It's when you stop projecting goodness onto people and start seeing them as they truly are, not as you wish them to be. And no lesson is more difficult, more uncomfortable, or more necessary than this one. Humans are not driven by purity. They are driven by self-interest. This truth isn't meant to make you bitter. It's meant to make you unshakable. When the Stoics spoke about human nature, they weren't condemning humanity. They were freeing themselves from illusion. They understood that expecting people to act against their own interests is the fastest path to disappointment, heartbreak, and betrayal. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you wake up, remind yourself today, you will meet the selfish, the ungrateful, the arrogant, but they are this way because they cannot yet tell good from evil." He wasn't angry. He was aware. When a woman changes her behavior, pulls away, loses interest, or shifts her loyalty, most men take it personally. They assume it means they weren't good enough. They assume it means she lied. They assume it means something is wrong with them. But the truth is far simpler and far older. People stay when the exchange is valuable. People leave when the exchange stops serving their needs. That's not cruelty. That's human psychology. A woman doesn't remain connected because of the memories you share, or the history you built, or the promises exchanged in better days. She stays because the relationship still meets her emotional, psychological, or practical needs. When those needs shift, her loyalty shifts with them. You've seen this in your own life. Even if you didn't recognize it, the lover who once swore she would never leave suddenly becomes distant when your life becomes unstable. The friend you trusted disappears the moment you stop being useful to them. The family member who claims unconditional connection only calls when they need something. At first, this feels like betrayal. But then you realize this is not betrayal. This is human nature. It hurts only when you expect people to behave differently. Humans are not wired for unconditional loyalty. They are wired for survival, comfort, advantage, and emotional fulfillment. A relationship, any relationship, is an exchange. When the exchange is balanced, the connection thrives. When the exchange becomes unbalanced, it collapses. This principle operates everywhere. A partner who loses interest when you lose direction isn't necessarily shallow. She simply follows the psychological law that attraction flows toward strength, toward stability, toward value. A friend who drifts away when your life becomes difficult isn't necessarily evil. Your struggles no longer fit into the role you once played in their world. A colleague who was kind when you were useful, but cold when you weren't, isn't two-faced. They're simply moving according to incentives. People don't serve ideals. They serve interests. And here's the hardest part. So do you. You detach from friends who drain your energy. You lose attraction to partners who stop meeting your needs. You avoid people who create chaos. You've made the same calculations, quietly, internally, without guilt, because you thought it was different when you did it. But it isn't. It's the same mechanism. The Stoic perspective isn't people are bad. It's this: people are predictable. Once you accept this, everything becomes clearer. You stop expecting unconditional loyalty. You stop being shocked when someone pulls away. You stop taking human behavior personally. You stop giving more than people are willing to return. You stop tying your worth to how someone treats you. Instead, you begin to operate from reality, not illusion. You start building relationships based on mutual value and mutual respect, not wishful thinking. You start choosing people who show consistency, not people who speak poetically. You start observing actions, not promises. You start valuing those who stay when the exchange isn't convenient, not those who appear when things are good. This is what it means to see the world with Stoic clarity. When you understand the brutal truth of human nature, you don't become cold, you become free. You free yourself from unrealistic expectations, and you free others from needing to pretend. You navigate relationships with eyes open. You give without losing yourself. You love without surrendering your center. And you stay grounded even when people shift around you, because you finally understand people act according to their nature, not your hopes. Your clarity, not their loyalty, is what protects you. Most men crumble when they learn the brutal truths of human nature. They become cynical, angry, resentful. They take the realization that loyalty is conditional and twist it into an excuse to hate the world. But that's not the Stoic way. A Stoic man doesn't collapse under truth. He transforms through it. Because the purpose of understanding human nature is not to become bitter, it's to become unshakable. A Stoic man accepts that people will leave when benefits change, that affection shifts with circumstance, and that loyalty is limited. But instead of resenting human nature, he adjusts to it. He lets reality harden him, not poison him. He is not surprised when people disappoint him. He is not devastated when affection fades. He does not cling to fantasies about unconditional devotion. He simply sees people for what they are, human, driven by need, fear, desire, and self-interest. Because he understands this, he navigates relationships with clarity rather than illusion. A Stoic man does not expect perfection, so he cannot be betrayed by imperfection. He does not expect others to give endlessly, so he isn't shocked when their giving stops. He does not expect unconditional loyalty, so he doesn't collapse when loyalty breaks. He knows that love can be beautiful, but it is never free of conditions. He knows that friendship can be meaningful, but it is never free of exchange. And he chooses to participate anyway, consciously, not blindly. This is not coldness. This is wisdom. Stoicism teaches that bitterness is a form of attachment. You only become bitter toward people when you expected them to be different from what they are, when you cling to illusions, when you demand that human beings transcend their nature. The Stoic man releases those expectations, and with that release, resentment dissolve. He continues to love, but never depend. He continues to give, but never abandon himself. He continues to care, but never collapse into neediness. He sees clearly, chooses deliberately, and walks away cleanly when respect is gone. Because what separates a Stoic man from the rest is not his ability to avoid pain, but his ability to move through truth without letting it corrupt his spirit. He learns to hold two things at the same time: awareness of human imperfection and compassion for human struggle. He protects his heart without hardening it. He stands firm without becoming cruel. He maintains independence without building walls. And when others test him, leave him, or fail him, he doesn't chase, cling, or beg. He simply returns to his center calm, grounded, and intact. Love would never depend, care, but hold your center. These are not slogans. They are survival principles for a man who wants to remain powerful without becoming bitter. When a man embraces this path, He becomes untouchable, not because he is emotionless, but because he is no longer controlled by illusion. He sees truth, accepts truth, and rises above it quietly, steadily, stoically. At the end of all these truths about human nature, female psychology, loyalty, distance, and boundaries, there is one realization that separates men who stay lost from men who finally rise. You are not here to change human nature. You are here to master yourself. When you stop expecting purity from attachment, when you stop hoping people will be better than their incentives, when you stop collapsing your identity into someone else's approval, something powerful happens inside you. Your center returns. Your clarity sharpens. Your masculinity awakens. This is the point where most men fall apart, bitter, resentful, angry at the world, but not you. Because a stoic man doesn't respond to reality with bitterness. He responds with awareness. He responds with strength. He responds with self-possession. Now you know the truth. No one dared to say, people move according to benefit, emotion, and self-interest. And instead of being destroyed by that truth, you can finally use it to build a life rooted in balance, boundaries, and self-respect. So here's your choice, one that will define the man you become. You can keep living in the illusion, waiting for people to value you the way you value them. Or you can rise into the version of yourself who leads with calm discipline, distance, strength, and unwavering standards. If this message spoke to you, if it woke something inside you, then don't let it fade. Hit subscribe. Drop a comment. I choose awareness. Join this brotherhood of men who are rising in silence. This channel is not entertainment. It's a training ground for men who refuse to stay blind, broken, or manipulated by emotion. If you're ready for the next step, if you want to understand the deeper layers of female nature, human psychology, masculine boundaries, and emotional self-mastery, then watch the next video I've queued for you. Because once you awaken, there is no going back. Now you rise with clarity, with detachment, with power.